My name is Tom. I'm an engaged learning officer here at the London Archives, and it's my pleasure this afternoon to present you with this talk, Photographers on the Front Line, which is a tie-in to the London in the Second World War exhibition that we're holding here on site until October of this year. And if you've been to these talks before, if you've actually been to our exhibitions before, you would have certainly seen some of these photographs before. This is the Cross and Tibbs collection. They come out really whenever we talk about the Second World War, because they are such a sort of important part of our collection here. They give such a sort of vivid sort of insight and depiction of the City of London during the war. So it's really quite a nice opportunity for me to kind of get stuck into the whole collection. Usually I talk about a couple sort of here and there. So this is nice to be able to sort of talk about the whole set. And so the plan for this afternoon is that we will. I've taken a small selection of the 370 odd images. I've gone sort of for a roughly chronological journey through the collection, picking out on some sort of key moments as depicted in this collection. So it's not intended to be comprehensive, and as we'll hear, it won't be a comprehensive sort of study of London during the Second World War. It really is a guide to this collection, and if you're interested in delving into the collection in more depth, they are available online through the London Picture Archive, where you can see all the images in one place. And there's also a Second World War gallery as well, where they put lots of these are featured, but there's some context there as well. And I'll give you the date properly at the end of the talk, but just to say, on a week on Friday, we'll also have a physical document display here in the archive, where you'll be able to see them in person as well. So, Before we make a start into the photographs themselves in great detail, it's probably befitting of me to tell you a little bit about who Cross and Tibbs are. Well, it's Arthur Cross and Fred Tibbs. And they were two City of London police officers who were part of the City of London Police Force during the war and before the war, and continued their work during the war. I should probably make a mention of this distinction of the City of London Police. One of the nice things that we found since doing these talks online is people can join us from further afield. And I'm sure Londoners need no reminding of the distinction between the City of London and London as a whole. But it is a distinction I found that it can be alien to our visitors. So in London, we make a distinction between the City of London, which refers to the oldest part of London, initially the Roman city, sometimes call it the square mile, or just the city, often associated with business, but there's lots of cultural attractions as well. And incidentally, we are part of the City of London Corporation as well here at the London Archive. So we talk about the City of London as the square mile, and then we talk about London as a whole. And because of sort of the age and the traditions of the city, it has sort of some sort of quirks and peculiarities and traditions that it guards on quite jealously and quite proudly as well. And one of these is that it has its own police force as well. So you'll be familiar with the Metropolitan Police, but there's another police force, the City of London Police, and this is the police force to which Cross and Tibbs belonged. And what this means is that the images that we will see today will exclusively focus on the city of London. Obviously, the bombing of the Second World War, the Blitz, which is sometimes used to describe to the period 1940 to 1941, but also the kind of the bombing as a whole is a London-wide story, and is of course a nationwide story as well. But today, because of the peculiarities and particularities of this collection, we will be focusing on that story as it relates to the City of London specifically. So Arthur Cross was the City of London photographer, a role to which he was appointed in July 1939, and he was based at Bishopsgate Police Station, which you can see here on the left-hand side as you look at it. And the photography was only part of his role, and he was permitted to spend no more than 4 hours on his photographic work. One of the first tasks that he undertook was the updating of a criminal records index. It's detailed information on both Cross and Tibbs is sort of frustratingly hard to come by, but filling in the dots, sort of deduction, I assume that's taking photographs of criminals and using them to augment the records. And then in September of 1939, when the war begins, Cross is tasked with taking photographs of the City of London Police Force itself to use on identity cards, sadly of which only very few survive, and I've certainly not found one for Cross or Tibbs, which would have been a very nice accompaniment to this talk. Arthur Cross had to make do with fairly limited equipment and facilities. He had a second-hand, a Kodak half-plate camera and a second-hand Leica camera as well. The darkroom was a basement kitchen that had to be converted for the purposes, and we made do with makeshift equipment and a limited budget, which he had to sort of supplement at times from his own salary. No sooner had he finished this task of photographing for identity cards than the Blitz, the bombing of London started. And what was at first assumed to be a small job, it was sadly predicted that bombing of London would only last a couple of weeks, and this could be a small job of documenting bomb damage, ended up lasting the entire war. In order to take on this new task of documenting bomb damage, Arthur Cross was supported with an assistant, Fred Tibbs, a fellow City of London police officer, but also a keen amateur photographer as well. What we don't know at this stage, lost in the mists of time, who took which photograph. I think on a few it's possible to identify, but for the vast majority we don't know who took which photograph. And they combined these photographic duties with their job as wartime policemen. And what's particularly sort of special and valuable about these photographs is the immediacy of which they are taken. Very often they are taken just as the all clear has been sounded. So they are very much sort of part of the response effort to the bombing, and hence the name photographers of this talk, photographers on the front line. We get a sense of just how on the front line they were. On the left, the images of Bishopsgate Police Station, where they were based during the war, and we can see fittingly enough, from their own collection, the bomb damage that sustained. And because they were on the front line, sometimes we see not just the aftermath of the destruction, but the process of responding to it as well. For example, that image on the right-hand side of Houndsditch near Aldgate, where we can see the battle is still being fought against the fires. You might just be able to make out right at the top right-hand side of the image there, the firefighter on the top of the ladder. None of these photographs are staged, although we'll see that many are sort of incredibly well composed, and so are. If we sort of detach ourselves from the challenging nature of the subject matter, there are some very arresting and beautiful images in their own right. And importantly and interestingly, they document not just the material sort of fabric of London as it's under attack and being destroyed, but also we get a sense of some of the equipment, the vehicles, and the people involved as well. So kind of a very varied collection of that too. And as I said, what the plan now is just look at a small selection, about a tenth if we were to be sort of mathematical about it, of the collection that we have. And I'm going to proceed in sort of roughly chronological order, with a few sort of skippings and combinings just for the sake of a good explanation. So we start then in August of 1940, and on a photograph taken on the 25th of August, following a raid on the sort of the night of the 24th, 25th. Wise and learned audience that you might be, you might not struggle with this as much as I do, but I get myself terribly confused sometimes with the dates of the bombings as they kind of cover the night. So just bear that in mind as we go through. So this is one of the first photographs in the collection. And it's an image of Fore Street in the City of London. And the first bombs to fall on the City of London started before the Blitz proper, as we might say. The story of the Blitz and the bombing, I'm sure, is familiar to some, and the dates will be in the forefront of some people's mind. But I'm sure there are other people in the audience as well that sort of are aware of the story, but maybe some of the dates aren't quite so specific in your head. But so you might be surprised then to see this as an August date, when we generally start the date of the start of the Blitz, the 7th of September, with the raid of Black Saturday. And so this raid, as far as we can tell, was accidental. It seems like the bombers involved had strayed off course, unable to bomb their intended target. They sort of jettisoned their bombs or dropped their bombs indiscriminately and returned to their bases in France. And in doing so, they're often thought to have started a chain of events with sort of huge strategic significance. So we say the Blitz starts in September. So August 1940 is the Battle of Britain, that phase after the fall of France, where there's preparations underway for a cross-channel invasion of Britain by the German army. Key to a success in that venture would be the destruction of the Royal Air Force, particular fighter command of the Royal Air Force, because if you don't have control of the skies, you can't cross the channel safely. So sort of, and as this battle is going on, the fighter command airfields in the southeast of England are under increasingly heavy attack, destruction of facilities, of aircraft, and kind of accumulated fatigue on the pilots as well. So what happens is that campaign is thought to be being successful. There is some consideration that the islands might be in real jeopardy, and this sort of accidental raid is thought to have changed everything, because as these bombs fall on London, the Royal Air Force has a counter raid on Berlin the night after. In sort of terms of destruction, ineffectual, but strategic consequences are massive, because this is seen as an affront to the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. It's seen as an affront to Hitler, who promised that bombs would not fall on Berlin. So reprisal raids are then planned in September, and this is the start of the Blitz proper. And during the Blitz proper, a third of the buildings in the City of London will be destroyed. One particularly badly damaged area is the area around 4th Street, which we saw just now. And a damaged but not destroyed survivor of that is St Giles Cripplegate. This is the sort of the lone medieval church in the centre of today's Barbican complex. And here we can see another image from Cross and Tibbs, documenting the interior and the exterior of this church. So we get a sense of the extent of the damage, but also the extent to which it was able to be rebuilt as well. In terms of symbols of the jeopardy of London, in terms of the kind of the architectural heritage of London and the wider morale and the welfare, there's probably no greater symbol of both the peril, good fortune, and resilience and planning all rolled into one than St Paul's Cathedral, rebuilt, of course, by Christopher Wren following the Great Fire of London of 1666. Its sort of great architectural and spiritual heritage meant that the great efforts were made to sort of protect it during the war, and it's a combination of hard work and good luck that it remains to us this day. It's sort of commonly into the popular imagination. It's sort of described as it's described as surviving the war unscathed, and that's true in the sense that we still have it. But there were some moments of huge peril and also of damage and destruction. The first of these, very early in the Blitz, is the 12th of September 1940, which was a night of heavy raids, and a very large bomb fell to the ground just underneath St Paul's Cathedral. It fell to the ground and buried itself 8 metres into the carriageway, and we can see that image here. Although the bomb didn't explode on impact, it could have done at any point afterwards, and all assessments sort of then and since would have pointed to the fact that had it exploded, the cathedral would have been destroyed with it, and therefore a team of Royal Engineers were dispatched to defuse and or remove this bomb, and they were led by one Lieutenant Robert Davis. Unable to, because of the fact that the bomb had sort of buried itself into the carriageway, they weren't able to disarm it or sort of detonate it in situ. So their only choice was to physically remove the bomb, which after sort of a series of painstaking excavations they were able to do, lasting a period of 3 days. They were then able to transfer the bomb to a truck, where one account describes Davis as driving quickly but carefully through the streets of East London, and in an act of great bravery for which he would later be awarded the George Cross. He drove the bomb himself at this point, sort of relieving his disposal team of his duties. Only he would be at risk should the bomb explode. And when the bomb was exploded in what's known sort of euphemistically as a bomb cemetery in the Hackney Marshes in East London, a 30-metre crater was blown in the ground, giving a sense of the scale of destruction that these weapons were capable of, and the near miss that we had. And of course, this tells another story that something today. There is still a legacy of unexploded bombs, UBX as they were known at the time, of unexploded bombs in London, particularly the developments in the sort of the east of London and Docklands as well. Every so often they have to be paused as these unexploded munitions are dealt with. And the second of the bombs to sort of threaten St Paul's Cathedral in the autumn of 1940 was on the 10th of October 1940, and this time a bomb actually exploded at the east end of the building. And here we see two images of that. I think the one on the left is actually particularly striking. There's something about the sort of the verticality of the image and the way that the light is shining through the gap in the ceiling that's particularly poignant. As we can see, damage is done from the falling rubble landing on that altar there, and there is something quite sort of spectacular about the lighting and the way it's sort of framing on the altar there as well. And then we get another image of the same scene on the right hand side. Yeah, once again, we get a sense of how well composed these images are, with the sort of the statue in the middle there bringing the eye up, and the way the light is coming through. And still on the same instant, on the 10th of October, here we have a more detailed image of the damage done to the altar there. And once again, if we sort of detach ourselves from the subject matter, you do get a sense of how well composed these images are, with the I'm not quite sure we call that feature there, but this sort of colonnade here, framing the two sides of it, the kind of upward sweep of the rubble. And I think there's something particularly poignant to me about the sort of the chair there, sort of put to one side, that kind of balance between sort of the holy and the practical all at once. Jumping slightly out of the chronology now, just to keep to the theme. Another bomb hit St Paul's on the 17th of April 1940, and I should say that we might be slightly out of order on the presentation there. I'll let you know how the sausage is made. I almost, until about 5 minutes ago, I thought this was also part of the October raid. A last minute save, I realised that they were two separate. They were two separate raids. So. Egg off my face on that moment. So this is now 17th of April 1940, so very much towards the end of the 1940-41 Blitz. And here we can see a bomb that's damaged the north transept, more significant in terms of its damage than the previous one that we saw, because this one detonated mid-air, rocking the dome and actually moving the wall of the south transept and smashing many of the windows as well. And the falling masonry that resulted created this hole in the cathedral floor. And one of the St Paul's Watch described it like this: "Well, we copped it last night. I've got worms in my head with all the noise, and my legs won't quite walk. Up in the dome area, we felt the shock of it nicely. St Paul's rocked, but only for an instant, and then quivering, settling down." So again, a near miss. As I say, what's interesting about this collection is the variety of subjects that it includes. It's both a record of the architectural damage to the city, but other details as well, including some of the weapons of war that were used against the city. And here we have an example of that. So these are parachute mines. We can see found on the pavement at the rear of Bishopsgate Police Station. One of the sort of the deviling things about archive catalogues is they tease you. They sort of give you a bit of information, but they don't tell you everything. And this is certainly one such example. I'm assuming from the context that this has been disarmed in some way, but who disarmed it and what the story was behind that, we're not told. It would be a separate piece of research to find out. But either way, this is a parachute mine at the pavement at the rear of Bishopsgate police station, and these were very feared weapons at the time. As the name suggests, they're actually an adaptation of a naval weapon, and of naval mines used to attack and attack shipping and sort of block shipping lanes, but repurposed for use on land. And the parachute, these were not sort of dropped straight from the plane as you might depict. Rather, they are dropped from the plane, and then they reach their target by parachute. And this was seen as made them particularly feared and particularly hated, because if they were landing by parachute, there was no pretense that they were being aimed. The notion of how accurate bombing is and how well targeted it was is obviously a very vexed question throughout the Second World War. What could have been achieved, what should have been achieved, is a very difficult question to answer. But in this early period of the war, and particularly the Luftwaffe had for the most part, attempted to aim their bombs on strategic targets, be that civilian morale or military ones. They made an attempt to bomb accurately for the most part, but the parachute mines were an exception, because if something's landing by a parachute, it can't land accurately. It's going to be blown by the wind. So this combination of their inaccuracy and huge destructive potential made them so particularly sort of feared and hated by the population of London. And this is the after effect of one of these bombs. This is Elm Court, Middle Temple. In both occasions, you really get the sense of the amount of destruction caused there. And as I say, there's this strange. Not strange, but it's sometimes feels slightly incongruous, some of the things that are included. And this is a good example. This is a view of a German machine gun found at Three Cranes Wharf after a raid. I'm no expert on guns, but I'm assuming this would have been fitted to a German bomber. And I include it for two reasons. One, just to give a sense of the various things that are in this collection, but also to make another point about how hard it was to defend against the bombers at this point. So the idea, of course, is of fitting a machine gun to your bomber is that you can fend off attacking aircraft, or defending aircraft, perhaps I should say. But in reality, during this early phase of the Blitz, 1940 to spring 1941, the technology at the time meant that the bombers could really get through totally unscathed. For the most part, they were flying at night, and they weren't. It wasn't possible to operate. It wasn't possible for fighters to operate effectively at night, because it was, for the simple reason that it's dark and bombers move comparatively quickly. So that they were both hard to locate over their target, and even if you then did manage to locate your target, they were hard to effectively engage. This wasn't through lack of trying, and in the early period, what was known as cat's eye night fighters were used, which is one of those sort of funny euphemisms. A cat's eye fighter is one that doesn't have any night fighting equipment. It's relying simply on the eyesight of the pilot. And there were some big battles really within the bureaucracy about whether these should be used, because there's great risk for the fighter pilots flying at night for kind of negligible reward, strategic reward. Other types of defences were tried as well. Anti-aircraft guns, a similar story, not very effective, and perhaps it was more in morale, the sense that something was being done, despite how effective it was. And barrage balloons, which we'll see on a little bit later as well. These were large sort of torpedo-shaped balloons, which forced aircraft to fly higher, making them less accurate. And if you were unlucky enough to collide with one, they had a clever mechanism where they would disengage from their mooring, release a parachute, which would drag the bomber to the ground. But you had to be really in the wrong place at the wrong time to collide with one of those. Despite these efforts in this early period of the war, only 1% of bombers were sort of intercepted by defences. More aircraft were lost due to sort of accident and mishap than to defensive action. And this accounts then for the huge amount of destruction that would follow. As we heard, 1/3 of the buildings of the City of London were destroyed. And one of the most famous and devastating raids was on the 29th of December, 1940, and this is the often described as the Second Great Fire of London. And the culprit for that was what we can see on the screen here. This is an incendiary bomb. So largely the destruction we've seen so far was caused by high explosive bombs, simply bombs that explode, as the name suggests, that cause their destruction through sort of explosion and percussion. But incendiary bombs are designed to set fires, and they're designed to set fires that are very hard to put out because of the magnesium, the thermite in them. They can't be put out with water. You have to put them out with sand. And this sort of use of more and more incendiary bombs was a developing tactic, and was culminated really in this raid on the 29th of December, the Second Great Fire of London. It deliberately targeted the city for its economic significance, its cultural significance as well. But the timing of the raid was crucial as well. So the 29th of December put a couple of things in the attackers' favour. First of all, there was the expectation that the city would be, if not deserted, sparsely populated because of the Christmas break. And the City of London has a very low residential population. At this point, the area of the city that was targeted was famous for its paper warehousing and book selling, so there's plenty of combustible fuel there as well. And then the 29th of December was also an exceptionally low tide on the Thames, which meant there was less water to be able to fight the fires. And these factors combine to being a hugely destructive raid, with over 1,500 sort of separate fires, each designated a major incident burning at the same time. And these images now give us a sense of the scale of that destruction, and as I say, also show us just how close to the action that Cross and Tibbs were in the taking of their photographs. So this is St Paul's Churchyard on the left and Paternoster Row on the right. Sort of both, you can see the firefighters in business, and then this sort of more haunting shot on the right. I can't tell from the image whether that's reflection or whether that's mist rising from the rubble. But we also know that the fire burned so hot that the rubble was smouldering, sometimes for days afterwards. So two very sort of equally arresting different photographs there. And then the one detail that I actually found quite moving on this image on the right is if you can't quite make out what it says, but can you just see the door frame is still standing, and the sign is still, the name of the business or the building is still there as well. I found that quite a poignant detail when I noticed that earlier. Another sense of how close St Paul's got. So this is the occasion as well. I'm sure I can't show it for copyright purposes, and also it's not in the Cross and Tibbs collection. But this is the night that very famous photograph of St Paul's Cathedral was taken, the Herbert Mason photograph from the Daily Mail. This is the image of the dome of St Paul's, sort of shrouded in smoke. This is that night, and this effectively is the aftermath of that fire. And again, in terms of sort of strange details, the postbox has survived. Not unsurprisingly, but again, those sort of weird juxtapositions of destruction and daily life that are such a feature of the photography of this period. So St Paul's famously survived the Great Fire, but many London buildings didn't. And on that night, the Guildhall was very badly damaged, if not quite destroyed by the fire. 8 other Wren churches destroyed that day as well. I've not been able to sort of cross check it, but one of the accounts I have read tells a story of one of the City of London, one of the firefighters fighting the fire in the City of London, basically calling up Churchill and saying it's a choice between the Guildhall and St Paul's, which shall we save, and St Paul's being the one that survives. So I've read that account. I've not had a chance to cross check it, but it does give you a sense of the decisions that were being made and the harsh decisions that were being made on that night. And of course, we can't talk about the fire without the firemen as well. So here are two firefighters. Here's an image of two firefighters as part of that raid. So we're now in. This is January 1941 as the campaign is wearing on, and this is another very famous incident. So this is January the 11th. Yes, January the 11th, and this is when a bomb struck the roadway just in front of the Bank of England, but above Bank Underground Station, blowing a hole into the roadway and collapsing the booking hall. You do read slightly discrepant accounts of the amount of casualties, but the account I have is 57 people are killed in this single incident. Of course, sheltering on the tube became a feature of London life during the Blitz, and although it offered much protection, it wasn't always guaranteed safety, as this shows. And this also is, again, if we take a step back from the loss of life, does give us a very vivid picture of the efforts and the organisation and the resources given in the response to one of these these bombings. We can see the crane there. We can see various sort of civil defence staff, but also we see military staff as well. So this obviously was and is a major road junction, and in the sort of the heart of the city. So sort of humanitarian concerns as well. There are simply practical concerns about keeping the city working. And so within 3 weeks, first the Pioneer Corps clear the rubble, and then we can see the kind of the clearance works going on here. Bank of England in the background there. So after the casualties are removed, the rubble needs to be cleared, and then within 3 weeks, the Royal Engineers have built this sort of temporary structure to allow it to continue. I think we might just let that one sit for a minute. So, particularly striking image. Now, I think I've said, forgive me if I have, I don't think I've said, but forgive me if I have, one of the things that's quite special about these photographs is they're not posed. There is a sense of them being taken in action. But I wouldn't be surprised if he waited a little, whether it was Cross or Tibbs, whoever took this one, if they waited a little while to get that bus in the centre, and then two black cabs behind. So not posed, but you can see they're waiting. And the three figures at the bottom there, I think, have probably been standing there, a little while. Some things can be, some things you can wait for, but sometimes you just have to be in the right place at the right time. And this next image we're going to see is probably the most famous of Cross and Tibbs' images. I'm sure you will have seen this. You will have seen this before. Many of their other images are, you've seen it before, you've seen this shot, and you wouldn't quite know it, the Cross or Tibbs unless it was labelled. But this one you will certainly recognise. And this is Queen Victoria Street, as this, I think it's the Salvation Army headquarters, but forgive me if I'm wrong, as this collapses. So you really, again, just to underscore that point of their police duties giving them an access and an immediacy that wouldn't always be the case. And this is, as I say, Sunday 11th of May 1941. So the aftermath of what in if we judge in numerical terms, was the worst raid of the Blitz, in which 1,436 people were killed. Another 2,000 were seriously injured. And I think and to me, this raid underlines sort of the spite and the spite of such actions, because this was also the last raid on the City of London itself. There were a few other There were a few other raids on other cities up until the 16th of May, but this was the last raid on the City of London, and yes, I'm correct to say, and London as well. So by May of 1941, there was a realisation that the the strategic value, by which that's just sort of military speak for saying, something that's going to affect the long-term outcome of the war. That there was no real strategic value left in bombing London. There had been a hope that at first it would have been a way to just to give fighter command, force fighter command to give battle and destroy them. And then there was the sort of the propaganda idea. Then there was an idea that it would sort of break the will of the British people, so they would no longer want to fight. But by this point, there's a recognition that it won't do any of those things, and the German army is gearing up for its sort of doomed invasion of Russia, known as of the Soviet Union as it would at the time, known as Operation Barbarossa. So from 1941 up until 1944, there were only very sporadic raids on London and on the United Kingdom. And what this does is this gives sort of the people of London a bit of a chance to catch their breath, repair some of the damage, and make safe the buildings. And in this next series of photographs, we get a sense of really the scale of the destruction from a wider perspective. So as you can see from the caption there, this is St. Paul's Cathedral. But following the destruction of the buildings around, again, just underscoring the point of how lucky we are to still have this building today. And also, I can't help, it's a bit off topic, but how nice it is to see it, post its sort of Victorian and 20th century sort of smog-filled days. It obviously looks a lot cleaner and brighter today. So we can see this is the view of St. Paul's Cathedral from the southwest, and now we have the view sort of from St. Paul's Cathedral heading on northwest. So this is a view from the Golden Gallery, and this is summer 1942. I'll give you a sense. It's always nice just to take in the topography yourself. So I'll just give you a moment to do that. So a few features to orientate yourself. At the top, sort of top left-hand side of the image, that's the old Bailey. That's central criminal court. Itself, we can see that the dome there, and the dome is a deliberate reference, of course, to the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral. So Christopher Wren, the designer of St. Paul's Cathedral, is one of those architects that's sort of fallen in and out of favour over the years. But he was very famous. He was very popular in Edwardian Britain, so much so that there was described as the Renaissance with a W, because his buildings were back there. So we have the criminal court at the top there, and then the other aspect of this that's probably worth pointing out is these circular structures there. So these are temporary dams, as they're described, but these are water containers as well. I'm assuming in preparation for future air raids, but also just for general use as well, because obviously there's been so much damage to the services in the city at this point. We started our presentation looking at 4th Street, and it's near the Barbican today. It was the first part of the city of London to be bombed, but it sustained massive damage throughout the Blitz. And this next series, these next images are five images that go together as a panorama, which give you a sense of quite how much damage was done. We were deducting that it was taken from a building in Little Moorfields, and we're going to go from Coleman Street to Chiswell Street, if those place names are familiar to you. But what we'll do is we'll just go through it fairly slowly, and I'll let you just take this in. Obviously that's St. Paul's in the background, and again Central Criminal Court, they're right there to help you orientate yourself, and railway line in the front. Once again, you get that sense of how well composed these images are. Follow that sort of curving line along the way there, the way that's been used to divide up the image, and sort of strongly show that contrast between the standing buildings on the left and the cleared buildings on the right. This area today is the area around the Barbican Centre, which building work started in 1960s. And I'm assuming at the bottom right, the top right of that corner, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that's a barrage balloon. I couldn't tell for sure, but that's my assumption. At first, I'm not going to lie to you, I thought, why is there a giant potato in the top right-hand corner of this image? And then I came to my senses, and I'm assuming that's a barrage balloon there. And actually, I'm going to go back. Sorry to this too, Zoe. I'm going to go back one, because on some of them, can you just see in the top, very faintly, in the top right-hand corner there are some barrage balloons still flying over London. So although we know that there is going to be a sustained lull in the bombing, of course the people of London don't. Sorry, and then we'll go forward one more, Zoe. And that's sort of on that sort of slightly rather gruesome segue. So there's very little in the way of sustained bombing from May 1940 up until 1944. The start of 1944 sees the beginning of what's known as the baby blitz, so-called at the time, and then the baby blitz gives way in June of that year to what's known as the flying bomb campaign or the vengeance campaign. Various names are used. But what distinguishes this and this becomes the final chapter of the bombing of London during the Second World War, and what distinguishes this from the earlier bombings is that the final attacks are done not by aircraft but by missiles. Two different types of missile. The V1, known as a flying bomb, something like a modern cruise missile today, or a modern drone today, and the V2s, which are ballistic missiles, so the same technology that would be used today to launch nuclear weapons, or more optimistically, to launch people into space. And we don't have nearly as many images from this period in this collection as we do in the Blitz. That's partly of just to the geography of it. So the attacks we just talked about, the V weapon attacks, were their damage was more concentrated on the south of London in the case of the V1s, and the V2s, the east of London, although other bits were attacked. But that is sort of not for want of trying. So the nominal target of the V1 attacks, so the flying bomb attacks, was Tower Bridge. I say target. The way these weapons work is they have a set amount of fuel, a simple sort of magnetic and gyroscopic navigation system, and they're sort of pointed in the right direction, and then their engine cuts out and they land on their target or near their target. And the nominal targeting of that rudimentary system was Tower Bridge. I think my assumption has always been it's in part because of the propaganda value of damaging Tower Bridge, but also because it serves as sort of a nominal centre point for London as well. Tower Bridge wasn't ever hit by one of these weapons, but it was wasn't ever badly damaged, by one of these weapons. But there were some near misses, and one of these near misses hit the tug here. This is a tug to aid the transport and transit of shipping throughout the Pool of London, and this was hit by one of these missiles right at the start of the campaign in June 1944. And I'm afraid I can't remember. It's a bit disrespectful to their memory, but it was 5 or 6 people that were killed in this raid. But there was loss of life on that raid, and the tug here sunk to the bottom of the Thames and later had to be raised. So again, quite a poignant story, and also it shows again just the variety of things that are captured in this collection. And the last couple of images, again, these show the aftermath of the V1 of V1 raids. There aren't any images of V2 raids in this collection. So this is Aldergate Street, again, June 1944. And I thought this was a particularly arresting image as survivors are being sort of found in the rubble. Again, giving a sense of the efforts and resource, again, to sort of try and support people in the aftermath of these attacks as well, but also, again, just an incredibly well composed and sort of evocative image, the way that we have these sort of rectangular forms on the top left and bottom right, and the way that we have this sort of snake of people kind of going up and leading us to the focal point of the photograph. So really a very, very striking image if we can detach ourselves from the subject matter. Or maybe in this case, all the more poignant because of the subject matter. And then our final image gives us a sense of the human story of what we've been dealing with as well. So this is a man being rescued following the a V1 raid. And on that note, we will sort of say we'll finish our journey through this collection. A slightly abrupt ending, but as I say, one of the things about this collection is it's never going to be a kind of a comprehensive story, but it's a series of very kind of important and moving, literal snapshots of this account. So I hope that was of interest to you. I hope I've done these images and the personal stories and tragedies involved in them justice this afternoon. If you would like to see more of these images from the comfort of your own home, you can go on to London Picture Archive and you can see all of the images there. You can also see various other images supporting that from the Second World War. I particularly recommend comparing the. I've decided not to do it for today's talk, but one thing you can do very profitably is you can compare the Cross and Tibbs images with the online versions of the bomb damage maps as well. That's quite a good way of getting a sense of where things are and the topography as a whole. And if you're able to join us in person, we have various things coming up that will be of interest to you. So 2nd of May, if I get my dates right, that's a week on Friday. We'll have a chance to look at the physical photographs themselves. You're able to come here to the archives. A week after that, we have a wider display of archival material relating to the Second World War. And then we're still on the slightly grisly theme of bombing, but we're going slightly back in time. On the 22nd of May, we're coming up to a big anniversary of the first Zeppelin raid, so that on London during the First World War. And I'm quite excited for that, and then we'll have a guest speaker, Ian Castle, talking about that, who's written, I think, 6 books on that subject. So that'll be a real treat for people there. And then on the 6th of June, I'll bring out some documents to talk about that story of bombing in the First World War as well. Not on this list because it's not bookable yet, but also in September we'll have another guest speaker who will be giving a bit more information about the life of Fred Tibbs as well, called Finding Fred. So that will talk about their wartime duties, but also more broadly talking about their role as a police in the 1920s as well. I've not put it on because the booking link isn't ready yet, but it will be shortly, and then you'll be able to find that on Eventbrite as well, where you found this one. So at this point, it's over to you. If people have any questions or comments, either in person or at home, I'll be happy to hear them. And what I'll do is, just so you know, is I'll repeat the question because I'll be the only one mic'd up so that people at home can join us. So if there are questions or comments, gladly, dare I say even corrections, I'll gladly take them now. Yes?
I believe there was one of those parachute bombs actually landed in the grounds at St Paul's, and they disarmed it and took it away.
Okay, I've not personally heard that story, but I'm sure that's right. And I'm seeing some nods in the audience, so that yeah.
Actually landed in the trees.
Okay.
And obviously
yeah.
came along, put it in a wheelbarrow and took it away somewhere.
Yeah. Do you know, as part of the 1940-41 Blitz, do you happen
Yes.
to know? Yeah. Thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you. I'm always, it's one that it does sound a bit corny, but I very often go past St Paul's and just think, oh, good, we've still got that one, you know. And this sounds like I'm doing the rest of the city architecture down. I'm not. But when you compare it to that view east and you see the more modern things, it's nice that something of the Wren City survived. Thank you. Yes.
Excuse me. Thank you for the talk, it was great.
You're welcome.
What was the thinking behind Cross and Tibbs taking the photographs? I mean, was it simply as a record for history? I mean, that seems rather incredibly foresightful, and we're all very grateful, but or was there any practical purpose? And presumably they couldn't really use them for press because they were too graphic, some of them.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, so the question was, sorry, I should have repeated that first question. The first question was really an insight that one of the parachute bombs that we talked about did threaten St Paul's Cathedral. It landed nearby, but got caught up in a tree and was disposed of. So apologies for not repeating that one. And then the second question at the front here was just a bit more about the purpose behind Cross and Tibbs. Why were they being taken? Asking whether they were sort of practical or for sort of documenting for posterity. As I say, it's frustratingly hard to get a lot of detail about the time. The images have survived a lot more than the context, but reading between the lines, I do think it was both practical and a sense of posterity. I think there was a sense of both, but there was a thought that it would help to know kind of what happened and what order things happened. And you also made a really interesting point around they're quite graphic and sensitive, and could they be used for press? So some were used for press. So the one that we showed of the building collapsing, that made it into press circles, but others weren't. And I don't know this. This is purely a speculation. But one of the sort of most horrific raids, of which of course there's a little competition, one of the most horrific raids, incidents, I should say, came towards the end of the war when a V2 missile hit Smithfield Market. Over 100 people killed. A particularly gruesome recovery operation for reasons I think might be best to go unsaid. And there are no images of that. And I don't know whether they weren't there, they had other duties that day, or a decision was made not to take it. I don't know, but that thought definitely crossed my mind. Yeah, thank you.
Further to the previous question,
Yeah.
Is there any record as to who decided where photographs were going to be taken? Given that there were only the two photographers, do you think it was somebody made a decision that one area was more pertinent than others, whether it was historic value, what was actually targeted, what's actually here?
Yeah. So the question was, do we know much about the thinking process behind what was photographed on a given day? I honestly don't know. I've not. I wouldn't go as far as saying that information couldn't be found out, but I've not found a ready available source where it would be. If that makes sense. As you might imagine. My job is to know a little bit about a lot and sort of to put these together sort of fairly rapidly. So in any of the common sources that I've laid my hands on, I've not been able to find that out. The assumption, it really is just an assumption on my part, is that they had some discretion, but it's also probably based on their duties as well. I think I did say it. Certainly in the early years, there's a sense of you can do this, but don't let it get in the way of your real work. In terms of you have 4 hours, 4 hours a day to spend on photographic work. So I don't quite know is the honest answer.
You don't know whether they were released to be sort of full-time photographers.
It would.
Were able to go into these areas because they were the police and not just somebody.
Yes, yeah. So I'll just try and explain the question and the answer as well. So my understanding is that it was part of their duties. So I don't think it would be a case of there's been a raid, you've got the morning off, in big inverted commas, go and take some photographs. I think it would be a case of take your cameras with you when you're doing your business, and you have some discretion in what you do. That's my understanding, but it's more an assumption. I'd be happy to be kind of corrected on that. And this is definitely one of those talks that you do it and you think, I'm going to do this again at some point, and I'm going to have to research all these things that I now want to know and you want to know as well. So look out for that maybe sort of this time next year or something, and we might be able to have a few updates on that. Thank you. Yeah, really, really interesting question. Thank you. Are there any questions from home, Zoe? Okay, no question at home. That's fine. Any more questions in the room here?
I'm sure as you walk through Smithfield Market, there's plates either side as you walk through, and there is one of the V2 bog damage.
Yes.
There. So, yeah, I mean, so I'm sure you said that none were taken, didn't you?
Yeah. So
Or you didn't.
I'm not sure. So so the question was around the Smithfield Market incident and the V2 damage. So and there are memorial plaques. I've understood you right. Yeah.
Somebody obviously
Yeah.
didn't take
Yeah. So yeah, as I say, it was speculation. So, and on these, are there photographs on these?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I only think it's one.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Well, I might check that on my way home today. Is the answer? But as I say, it was speculation. I do know that with all of these raids, but actually the V2s in particular, there was always a real sort of insistence on the part of the authorities to balance, to balance. People will know this anyway, but sheltering from the extent of the destruction. So I wouldn't be surprised if, as I say, it was speculation. I wouldn't be surprised if they were encouraged not to take it, or not to take it straight away afterwards, or the photographs there's a bit after, or it might just be, as I say, it might just be a coincidence. I think I'll say that's on my way home, so I'll check that out. So thank you very much for the comment. It's appreciated. Any last chance for people at home to sort of start typing? Any more questions from people in the room? Well, in which case, let me thank you again for coming along. I was going to say I enjoyed it. That's not quite the right word with the topic, but I think you know what I mean. It's a very sort of worthwhile, interesting collection. So it's been a great satisfaction to share it with you this afternoon, both at home and in person. So hope to see you again at one of the talks here, if not sooner. So thank you again, everybody.